Hi folks, before we get into the video, we'd like to mention that we've had to dance around certain terms and words due to how they trigger YouTube's monitoring algorithm. Such rephrasing always sounds a little daft, but it can't be helped if we don't want to get flagged. With that out of the way, please do enjoy the video. Most people would probably be inclined to agree that things seem pretty fraught right now. Tech bro oligarchs with very serious government and policy heft, the corporate interests driving ever more demanding lifestyle and consumer pressures as the cost of living spirals ever upwards, bad faith actors, conspiracy theorists, hateful zealots, and plain old-fashioned liars. Amongst these, those that don't actually run the most dominant platforms on the internet all have access to the worldwide audience conferred by them, riding algorithm highways that drive their influence directly into our homes, hearts, and minds. Just flick on your phone and you'll be bombarded with endless ads for things you didn't know you needed and can't afford, and find broad-stroke statements damning whole swathes of people. Social media is a minefield where fun and friendship become entangled with spittle-flecked half-truth, and one unplugs into reality bummed out by yet more reactionary absolutes in a post-truth world. Think about that term, a post-truth world. Is there anything more dangerous? Anything that makes us more vulnerable? Similarly, there are few amongst us who aren't somewhat wistful for the possibility for self-generated contentment beyond the acquisition of endlessly replacing things, of constantly servicing online image and offline physique, dictated by the standards imposed by who exactly? In the meantime, the discontent mounts, the often misplaced anger bubbles, and isn't it all so damn shrill and mindless now? Formerly nameless and faceless online extremists feel safe enough to vomit their toxic twaddle into real-world spaces these days, whilst grifter politicians cash in on the hysteria, and policies become ever more ugly. The news looks like a preamble to some kind of apocalypse. Indeed, one could be excused for wondering if it's not the brains that are already dead, and it's the idiots that are still alive. Our go-to haven from all this has always been and remains Romero and his zombie films. As well as being damn good horror flicks, packing in as much tension, atmosphere and gore, amazing gore, as one could wish for, there exists beneath all that a rich and seemingly ever applicable allegorical facet that refuses to be buried by the age and era of the films. It claws its way to the surface in response to each new dubious milestone of our society, possibly because the fundamental issues affecting us as a species remain the same. This facet isn't exactly an undiscussed subject, of course, but if ever a topic was timely, it's now. So, if like us, you're sick of the targeted ads appearing the second you've expressed the slightest interest in anything, and sick of the constant prospect of the next online knee-jerk reactionary spasm, let's dive in, because Romero's zombie stories are chock full of some much-needed and always humane clarity of thought. Not necessarily from all the characters therein, of course. Some of those guys are crazy, but from an overall perspective in a kind of call to sanity by example, and bad example. Let's go back to the beginning. Night of the Living Dead is seen as groundbreaking for many reasons. Lots of those plaudits pertain to the innovative application of its cinematography, though just as many concern culture and political significance. These are the areas we'd like to focus on for this video. One of the most immediately obvious ways in which Night deviates from other films of the era is the casting of Duane Jones as central character Ben. Romero always asserted that his choice was based purely on the actor's superior talent during the audition process. However, rather than negating the socio-political aspects Jones' ethnicity inherently brought to the role, the incidental nature of Romero's decision actually adds a real-world parallel of gravitas. What does it matter if an actor or a character is black? especially comparative to the larger chaos outside. America at the time was feeding its youth to the machinery of a war they did not understand or care about. The assassination of President Kennedy was still an open wound. Society was in the grip of huge upheaval and civic unrest. Earlier in the same year as the film's release, both Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy were murdered. Though Romero couldn't have known the specifics of the future, he lived amongst societal conditions so tempestuous that a mere 2 years after Night's completion, the authorities of the US would open fire on its own youth, American citizens, at both Kent and Jackson State universities. Despite his assertion that Jones's casting had no connection to colour, Romero was an astute man, and it is hard to imagine that he wasn't at least somewhat aware of the connotations his decision would bring to his and writer John Russo's work. Against the socio-political backdrop just described, and especially because much of this terrible chaos boiled down to race hatred, the fact that Romero ignored the potential negative impact of casting a black lead actor is testament to his instincts and to his worldview. Or, to transcribe this scenario to its metaphorical film equivalent, are we really supposed to worry about differences in skin colour when the mindless dead are trying to eat us? The finale of Night delivers an ominous answer to that question, as Ben is shot by one of a group of rednecks and police in a scene which remains ambiguous and uncomfortable to this day. Did this man see a ghoul or some other kind of perceived threat? Intentional on behalf of its creators or not, this downbeat ending has a terrible resonance with real events that a happy resolution just could not have mirrored. Amongst other contemporaneous incidents, the shooting of 3 equal rights activists by the KKK in collusion with local police only 4 years prior springs instantly to mind. Given that incidents wherein black people are killed by police officers under questionable circumstances continue to occur with alarming regularity to this day, it is impossible not to point out the current relevance of this film from all the way back in 1968. Seen in this light, the movie's augury is a blunt one. The future will be grimly uncertain in real life and in Russo and Romero's fictional world if we can't cease slaughtering each other.
We must stop the killing or we lose the war.
However, despite Night's bleak ending, aspects of hope are inherent. The casting of Duane Jones as a character not defined by his colour was a revolutionary act in and of itself. The intrinsic subtext of Ben's demise provokes a justified outrage at its senseless nature, precisely because we have come to know Ben as a man, not as a colour. Indeed, it was a shrewd move not to portray Ben as idealised, morally impeccable, and wise. Again, the point is made by not making a point. Ben is just a guy, a human being, and the audience is forced to see him that way in the course of Night's runtime. This opens the door for observations outside those of race. Whilst the world goes to hell all around them, Russo's combative male characters, Ben and Harry Cooper, respond with aggression to each other. The presence of flesh-glutting ghouls becomes a catalyst for, arguably, a larger danger: ourselves. Ben and Harry's counterproductive antagonism hampers and negates any previous tenuous cooperation established for the benefit of everybody, escalating a taut situation to its inevitable conclusion, ending with both men fighting for the same gun and one man shot dead. This is a picture of the world in microcosm, people responding to the challenges and differences in others with absolute extremes of gut-led reaction. In these times of devastating religious terrorism, and with neo-Nazism and fascism raising their vile, empty heads once more, it is frightening how little we have evolved in the time since this film first screened. We have met the enemy, observed Walt Kelly via Pogo, and he is us. Others would adopt the concept of the zombie as accelerant for the irrational and selfish id in time, most notably on the show The Walking Dead. Although that show, as good as the early seasons were, ultimately lacked Russo and Romero's deft hand in extrapolating a meaningful conclusion to the themes beyond rinse and repeat brutality. Fast forward a decade, with a rift between himself and Russo in the interim leaving a writing vacuum, and this time Romero would add script duties to his already numerous other tasks. In Dawn of the Dead, Romero would be more cognizant of his commentary, deliberately infusing his film with thematic observation. As foundation to some of the concepts he explores, Romero casts a scathing eye over the popular media as an accomplice to lazy self-interest and consumerism. Before any scenes at the mall occur, we are presented with an example of pure greed over sense. In this scene, a TV executive broadcasts details of rescue stations that no longer exist, putting lives at risk just to keep the ratings high.
I want those supers on the air all the time. Without those rescue situations on screen, every minute people won't watch us. They'll tune out.
Are you willing to murder people by sending them out to stations that have closed down?
I want that list up on the screen every minute that we're on the air.
Got to keep those ad sponsors and their shareholders happy, right? At any cost. Intermittently throughout the film, the station is shown to repeatedly pitch its audience a fairy tale of dumbed-down sound bites and moral bullshit, or to put it in a modern context, using culture war rage baiting to the constant chagrin of the scientists they interview. This is particularly prescient in these times of anti-science political rhetoric and YouTube outrage videos.
Fucking pronouns!
A return to one of Romero's other bugbears, racial intolerance, is also viewed through a lens of material greed, as one jealous SWAT officer opines that the Puerto Ricans and black people in the building he is about to run murderously riot in have better, big-ass fancy apartments.
How the hell come we stick these low-life bastards in these big-ass fancy hotels anyway? Shit, man, this is better than I got.
In reality, these apartments are not particularly big and fancy, and the impression is of someone from a lower-class background driven to murderous violence over the scraps from the table that somebody else from a similar class has managed to attain. The division created by race in this context is a very convenient distraction, the only beneficiary being the corporate class who dine well at said table, and who sell us the idea of a level of material wealth most will never achieve, no matter how we work. The enemy is not another struggling demographic within the same class as ourselves, but the class who benefits from said division. I once read an online comment dismissing Dawn of the Dead's subtext as one piece of imagery stretched paper thin. The image of a vacant, mindless horde shambling to the comfort of the mall on pure instinct is certainly a powerful one. However, to write off the director's follow-up to Night in this way is to do the movie a disservice. The seam of allegory running through Romero's scrutiny of consumerism is rich, surfacing through several clever elements within the imagery, narrative, and development of character. An example of the first includes this scene, in which character Fran sits at a table applying makeup, just as we see the zombies juxtaposed against images of mannequins. We see Fran use her brushes and powders to take this thematic notion one step further. She observes her efforts in the mirror, looking for all the world like one of the lifeless mannequins that surround her. She appears subsumed into and beguiled by her empty consumer environment. Suddenly, a synthetic voice begins to drone in the background, still encouraging the purchase of sweets and candy in a dead world, long after the announcer herself has perished. It is a poignant moment as Fran's smile slips from her face, her reflection telling its own mute truth. It is a masterclass in show don't tell. Supporting this subtext along similar visual and thematic lines, we are presented with this scene of Flyboy and Fran in bed, expressionless, posed, once again distinctly mannequin-like. The camera pulls slowly back from their motionless forms, emphasizing their isolation in this manufactured environment of plenty. These scenes, of course, function as details of narrative and character development, but the implications they are tied in with are solid. Indeed, progression of character and narrative is very much entwined with the subtext. When our protagonists first take the mall, they behave like kids at Christmas, wallowing in conspicuous consumption and the joys of instantaneous material gratification. Jewels, clothes, gadgets, and a really big cheese. It looks pretty good to us, too. Perhaps this end-of-the-world gig isn't so bad after all, so long as we get to indulge in all the expensive toys and comforts we couldn't previously afford. We soon become aware of the trap, however. These things quickly become nothing more than vapid novelties, providing no long-term satisfaction. Our heroes descend into a rut of growing boredom and frustration. Ignoring the plight of the world outside in favour of material self-indulgence is ultimately demonstrated to fail. When Fran asks,
"What have we done to ourselves?"
she is not just talking about the living, allowing the dead to overrun them. Moreover, Fran is increasingly shown to be correct in her initial instincts about them all.
You're crazy.
This place could be a gold mine. We got to at least check it out.
This is exactly what we're trying to get away from.
Her intelligence and foresight manifesting into confidence and strength as the narrative progresses. It is an organic progression, hinted at in the opening scene and blooming into fruition naturally through the narrative, only culminating in the very last scene of the film. That first anger-born flash of proactive agency at the studio establishes Fran as a woman who can stand up for others when suitably outraged, before her character settles back into more culturally familiar roles of relying on her male compatriots for physical protection and the making of decisions on her behalf for her good.
She's pregnant.
Do you want to abort it?
As the others go off on what she knows to be a reckless venture, albeit with a high reward ratio, Fran's perception of herself is one of helplessness and reliance, both in terms of physical safety and her ability to direct herself in a decision-making capacity. She soon learns that this is not a position conducive to her survival. More importantly, she discovers the mental and emotional fortitude to act on this knowledge, discovering depths of resourcefulness that she didn't know she was capable of. The distinction between those first indications of inner strength in the opening studio scene and her subsequent scenes, learning to shoot, be heard, and to fly the helicopter, is that the former may be considered from a maternal response perspective, reacting in protective anger, whereas the latter scenes are manifestations of a considered set of decisions made for her own safety and well-being. Note well that we are not placing a higher degree of righteousness or correctness on self-service above the care of others. We are saying that this is a further dawning facet of a complex character breaking free of social norms and expectations, as well as embodying those other admirable maternal attributes. In her outstripping of gender-based assumptions and the expectations of the times and of her fellow characters, Fran doesn't need to become calloused or selfish. Nor does she become the cut-and-paste, quote-unquote, girl boss of much contemporary mainstream cinema. In Dawn, the exploration of gender and feminism is genuine, reached organically through points raised by actor Gaylen Ross to the director and the discussions they had thereof. It was not the result of an executive board meeting, as with the first lesbian kiss in Star Wars. This supposedly huge moment for LGBT representation in Disney and pop culture was purposefully constructed in blink and you'll miss it fashion, and excised by Disney for overseas markets with a more homophobic base. They also donated money to Republicans who supported Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, withdrew funding after the bill passed, and then continued donating 2 years later. Disney and other huge film studios are serving themselves. That individual films suffer from their obnoxious corporate facsimile of feminism, or insert progressive movement here, is an acceptable loss, so long as the larger corporate status quo is held. If their forward-facing stance is superficially progressive, no real change needs to take place. It is only when something as egregious as, say, the Weinstein scandal is exposed that any meaningful change is enacted. Hollywood does not serve feminism. It co-opts feminism, uses it, without understanding or caring about it. The corporate entertainment complex is a Che Guevara or anarchy symbol t-shirt, mass-produced in a foreign sweatshop. Just as Wooly is punching in the wrong direction, so are those pricked, prodded and rubbed into a daily rage over a period of years, into embracing the far-right grift of the truly, obscenely rich, because of their ire with Hollywood woke. Do you really think that Disney is genuinely woke?
You think that's air you're breathing now?
Hollywood is demonstrably driving large chunks of the population into anti-feminist, anti-woke, and often, ultimately far-right pipelines. And they do not care. Conversely, Fran's naturalistic and subtle arc is one of intelligence, inner strength, and their application to real-world capability, and it comes from a genuine perspective of female empowerment, not a tactical decision for business reasons. In the final scene, Fran completes this arc, emerging as the most resilient member of the group. The changes Fran gradually enacts are not well received by her lover Stephen, whom Romero does not vilify as a sexist pig here, but rather portrays as a man who is struggling with self-inflicted feelings of insecurity in the presence of more violence-capable male counterparts. This insecurity is misplaced, as his intelligence and skill set with the helicopter more than make up for his lack of experience with firearms. As opposed to embracing these valuable assets as something to impart, thereby making him possibly the single most valuable person there, he instead sees Fran's burgeoning self-direction through a lens of further threat to his role as traditional protector and a sole pilot. Stephen's insecurities ultimately manifest into self-destructive territoriality when a group of bikers invade the mall.
It's ours. We took it. It's ours.
Opening fire on the bikers is not a choice made in service of survival of his friend and his family. Instead, it is a fight he initiates based on ego and an attachment to the material things which he stole in the first place.
We're thieves and we're bad guys. That's exactly what we are.
To the risk of his survival, his friend and his family. To him, the mall is his, whether it actually is or not. Instead of letting this storm pass and potentially rebuilding, Stephen is willing to ignite an unwinnable firefight, risking everyone and everything for his territory, completely irrespective of the actual benefit conferred.
Now we've got a war.
In a zombie-infested world, a battered mall full of half-pillaged items is still a mall full of items that can assure survival, and is infinitely preferable to death at the hands of those doing the pillaging.
Just stay out of sight. After the place, they don't care about us.
Ultimately, when Stephen dies his slow, painful, lonely death, it is a result of his insecurity and the fragile masculinity that fuels it. Similarly, Roger's demise is born from his own folly. He is only present because he is a friend of both Stephen and Fran, yet visibly relegates both to secondary status almost immediately after meeting Peter, whom he appears to view as a man of strength, a quality to which he gravitates. From there, his real-world antics mirror the image he seems to have sold himself, that of an untouchable action man who's
got his body ass.
Once again, Romero, rather perceptively, does not portray Roger as a bad person. He definitely isn't. In place of that, we are shown that his self-perception is unhealthy and dangerous. During the plan to use the trucks to barricade the mall, Roger engages in a series of bad decisions, taking unnecessary risks, and is shown generally not to take the operation seriously. He uses bravado and bluster to shield himself from the fact that he is scared, a feeling that he has not confronted and assimilated since the opening scenes. Just like Stephen, his unresolved issues and self-perception are the cause of his lingering demise, all the strength in which he places such stock gradually ebbing away in an ironic and piteous final decline. Peter, who by no stretch of the imagination is perfect, because all of these characters are flawed and very human, understands the nature and place of violence the most. Despite his capability for dispensing it, the audience never once feels that Peter loses himself to it or abandons his empathy. However, he too almost becomes a victim to his own stoic masculine traits, hiding his growing horror instead of addressing it, until he can stand it no longer. In the film's final scenes, Peter gives in to the terror and despair that he has suppressed beneath the cool outer presentation of himself, and almost ends his own life. At the last moment, Peter finds the will to live and makes a heroic stand, saving himself by the skin of his teeth. His proceeding lines are typically stoic, but we know Peter is capable of making astute and even philosophical observations regarding external situations, and the audience hopes that he can turn this inspection inwards to confront his horror, instead of allowing it to grow in the depths and silence of his suppression of it. In a world where a certain type of popular click-hungry influencer often splits vulnerable young men into the binary absolutes of alpha and beta whilst they are only just learning about and discovering themselves, these characters represent an important lesson. This is especially pertinent when such tiny boxes bear little resemblance to the breadth of complexity and nuance, strengths and weaknesses inherent to real life. Statistics reveal an alarmingly high mortality ratio by self-unaliving amongst young men. Data compiled by Papyrus from the ONS demonstrates that self-unaliving is the main cause of death in young people under the age of 35 in the UK. Around 3/4 of these were boys and young men. It is the biggest killer of men under 50. We are clearly failing boys and men, and it has to stop. The presentation of impossible physical ideals in the form of rippling 8% body fat, body hair, absent male forms by big business and entertainment media is clearly contributing unnecessary pressures which don't help. Similarly, an unachievable standard of hard, impervious, emotional and mental strength by the worst, yet often most popular bad faith actors is actively destructive. Boys and young men do not matter to these people. Influencers and companies care about the accruement of clout and money, not helping young boys and men feel at peace with their bodies, minds, and emotions. The weight of Dawn's various scrutinies on consumerism, class, media manipulation, and damaging gender conformity, though never out of balance with the more important job of telling a bloody engaging story, has never felt more current, not now. We live in a time when "your body, my choice" is an actual saying, when abortion rights are being systematically eroded, and when unparalleled prioritization of corporate and shareholder interests occupy precedence over the interests of the larger population, over you, over me, The media repeatedly platform politicians pushing the idea that a minority, like the trans community, has some kind of existential threat, whilst right now, both you and I have microplastics in our brains, our hearts, our stomachs, our lungs. They are found in testicles, in placentas, in breast milk, and in our babies' first stools. At the same time, we are distracted by ever more unattainable images of what we should look like and the things we should have, prompting us to buy endless supplements, endless methods of hair removal, grooming gear, fake tan, makeup, and yes, even unnecessary surgery, as well as the most current gadgets, only for them to become obsolete in a few years. In short, we're encouraged to associate happiness with perfect faces and physiques, images of which we must then capture on our little machines, then doctor with filters to post for validation in online spaces, whilst all the time we are simultaneously slowly poisoned, our real-world environments ruined. Do these purchases and rituals make us feel as good about ourselves as the phenomenal amount of cash and energy spent on them would imply? Or at this point, am I merely a zombie, operating on instinct ingrained through programming, imperfect flesh forever wandering in search of the cool, flawless perfection of a mannequin? Pulling off socio-political subtext without coming across as preachy is a very delicate balancing act. And at least in his first 3 Tales of the Undead, Romero's observations are never jarring to their function as good entertainment. With Day of the Dead, it would have been an easy mistake to make. This time Romero returns to a subject previously examined under the various guises of racial tension, or one group wanting what another group has, and strips away the masks to attack the underlying cause. The result is an impassioned warning to deal with our base instincts towards tribalism before they consume us. In a hastily assembled underground facility, friction mounts between a group of civilian scientists and military personnel, the zombies outside once more becoming a catalyst for the real threat, our own animal proclivities. The allegory here is a world away from the previous 2 installments in its unveiled angry directness. This is no accidental byproduct of casting, as with Night, and the humorous satire of Dawn is gone, replaced by a decidedly bleak, perhaps even cynical tone. Romero aims his sights unwaveringly at the human inclination towards in-group loyalty, out-group hostility, a well-documented side effect of our evolution, and Day is his statement that it is something we can no longer afford. Further evolution beyond this poisonous animal trait, if even possible, must come as a conscious effort through reason, education, and compassion. These attributes are represented in Sarah. The antithesis of these qualities is embodied in the loathsome Captain Rhodes. Other characters orbit these two according to civilian or army, and to their tendencies towards either thoughtful reason or base instinct. There are a few wildcards though, more on them later. In the absence of the rewards of civilization, Romero's military is undeniably brutish, reverting to coarse Darwinian characteristics of survival of the fittest, and a respect of physical force as the absolute last word.
Steele, shoot that woman.
Bang! You're dead!
Shoot that woman or you're dead.
All right.
Conversely, the civilian contingent is, with one exception, humane and logical. In this contest of reactive human strategies, there can be only one winner. The stakes are high as we watch the dichotomy resolve to its conclusion. But first, those wildcards. Well, they don't get much wilder than Dr. Logan, mad bastard that he is. Appearing at first like a personable, clever eccentric on a mission, Logan, or Frankenstein, is eventually revealed as not only amoral, but finally as deliriously insane as they come.
It's not Father's stocking, it's my stocking. There, I put it away. I put it away, Mother, I put it away.
Nonetheless, some of the more indirect social commentary emerges through him and his interaction with the unforgettable Bub.
They are us,
Logan asserts during Bub's training, as Romero uses the zombie, much as he did in Dawn, to illuminate a specific aspect of humanity. In this instance, though, instead of being about what the zombies do, brainlessly go to the mall as they were programmed to do, even when this cannot make them happy, the theme now becomes what is done to the zombie. With patience, with compassion, Logan tries to educate and civilize Bub in an attempt to save the human race. After all,
civil behavior is what distinguishes us from the lower forms. It's what enables us to communicate, to go about things in an orderly fashion without attacking each other like beasts in the wild.
He is keen to emphasize an important coda, however. Civility must be rewarded, or it does not work. Now, does this mean rewarded with a procession of disposable material luxuries? No. Whilst he is introduced to new material things, it is clear that Logan wins Bub over with the aforementioned patience, compassion, and education. If Bub had encountered the items placed in front of him in the absence of Logan's humane care, he would have ignored them. The important material things he is provided with are a place to learn and grow, and the sustenance he needs whilst he does it. Compassion, community, understanding, housing, food, education, and well-being are, broadly, the rewards of civilization. Captain Rhodes' approach exists in diametric opposition to that of Logan, in that he demands civility from those in the compound without providing the majority of these rewards, and threatens to remove the rest. Rhodes' methodology is civility imposed by force, not incentive. This system is essentially fascism, a citizenry kept in line with violence and fear. As with every instance of fascism to date, Rhodes' regime falls when he pushes those under his heel beyond their ability to tolerate it. The irony is that Rhodes' recourse to fascism occurs as direct reaction to the absence of society and the rewards of safety, community, and well-being that make that society civilized. In our time of unprecedented levels and methods of connectivity, we have never felt more disconnected from community, more small, or more used and expendable to and by the billionaire oligarch and corporate class that tell us to expect more and more, whilst our quality of life becomes less and less in this extended period of seemingly endless austerity. Civility, as defined here, has not been rewarded, and the result is possibly best illustrated by the actions of Luigi Mangione, and more importantly, the public reaction to those actions. Just as the audience cheers when Bub snaps and maims Rhodes, the man who punished his civility, so too did the public show little sympathy for CEO Brian Thompson. Returning to our dichotomy, Romero dares to consider that reason and civility may fail in the face of our inherent unevolved impulses. Logan, as stated, is insane. His reason does not assuage his brutality, and even the beneficence of sustenance he provides his hapless student is instantly revealed to be desecrated human flesh.
What are you giving him in there, Frankenstein?
Given the direction of Romero's ruminations here, perhaps that's all it ever could have been, and the final tragic path in Bub's journey of emerging civility is its destruction through the violence of Rhodes and his men. We go on to watch in horror as Sarah and Ted's rationality falls before the same brute force, and as mutually beneficial cooperation succumbs to blind tribalism. In the end, we are left with just one last option. The solution offered by our final wildcards, John and McDermott.
Jesus, Mary, and Joseph.
Though their sympathies lie with Sarah, a character already inhabiting the female empowerment that Fran gradually discovers in Dawn, and a character we consider to stand proudly alongside both Ripley and Sarah Connor as a beautifully written, nuanced female hero, their philosophy is almost as far removed from hers as that of Rhodes. When eventually revealed, their ideas are in opposition to the implicit fundamentals of science that Sarah lives by. John delivers an eloquent speech in which he asserts that it is not man's job to decode the mysteries of nature. Further, he sees individuals as civilized, but crucially, civilization has failed. They have no interest in rebuilding what once was, and stress that any future generation should be taught never to dig out the restored relics of Western civilization. In fact, they could have left it all behind,
even if all this wasn't going on.
Resigned, but accepting. Their notions on the human condition amount to a kind of affirmative pessimism.
Maybe if we tried working together, we could ease some of the tensions.
Sarah entreats John.
Well, that's the trouble with the world, Sarah darling. People got different ideas concerning what they want out of life.
He retorts, in the biggest understatement of the whole series. It is ironic that some considered the ending of Day to be not tough enough, even fluffy, because Romero obviously finishes his film on John's philosophy of cynicism. Maybe the modern world does just contain too much learned savagery, because some people will never, ever be able to evolve beyond that redundant yet oh so prevalent evolutionary revenant of the human psyche, whereupon modern societal savagery and extremism finds its foundations. That instinct towards in-group loyalty, out-group hostility. Crucially though, John's is a cynicism with a silver lining, because he knows that some people will evolve. And maybe, if we look after each other in good communities who value compassion and understanding, we can enjoy whatever time is left to us, get us some babies, and bequeath the world to future generations who may get right all the things we got so horribly wrong. There is, after all,
plenty to do, plenty to do. So as long as it's you and me and maybe some other people, we could start over, start fresh.
In the end, even Bub, driven to violence by violence at such a vulnerable stage in his development, refuses to return to the mindless group behavior of devouring the screaming flesh of a victim. Later efforts would conclude that the godfather of the undead hadn't washed his hands on humanity, and still had lots to comment on. Sadly, and at least partially due to budgetary restraints, these films are a mixed bag at best, and never reached the dizzying heights of the original three. Land of the Dead is probably the best of these, and deconstructs the echelons of corporate classism rather well. We may do a video on that one at some point, but we'll see. Romero's influence on modern culture is incalculable, however, with zombie apocalypse becoming a concept that waxes and wanes in the cultural zeitgeist over and over again. And why not? Zombies are great fun. They are also the perfect vehicle for the exploration of our fears, concerns, even our very nature as human beings. In a world where a panicky, impulsive public elect ever more crazed choices of leader to represent us, where religious extremism threatens everyone, where whole swathes of humanity are displaced and made refugees, and finally, on a personal level here at Kerstink, not being immune to any of this despite our lofty words, where we spend more money we cannot spare on crap we don't need and doesn't make us any happier, Romero's movies are as important as they ever were. We won't ask you to like and subscribe. You either enjoyed this video or you didn't, and we'll do whatever accordingly. Instead, we'll continue in the tradition of the few videos we've made so far, and recommend another channel that we really like. Simple Horror Reviews is a channel whose moniker does not do the content justice. His reviews are, in fact, very well informed and nuanced, his opinions his own and not parroted, even when they may perhaps be unpopular ones, as with his review of The Substance. Give him a whirl if that sounds like something you'd like. Until next time. as George would say, stay scared.